Hey everyone, this is Dwayne Monroe, and I'm here once again with Brother Alkmi, and we are continuing here on the Dialectical House Party, our structured dialogue series. This is dialogue number 5. We had a little technical glitch, so I'm going to repeat what I said previously, which is that I'm actually pretty proud of the work that we've been doing, and we're continuing to do, and uh, we're going to continue where we left off, essentially. And we are on slide 44 of the deck that Alchemy created. By the way, in the show notes, you will see a link to that deck. Alchemy, we're using a Zencaster software, and I am not actually seeing on Zencaster where I can share the screen with people. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, everyone listening and watching this, you're getting the technical background as I talk. No big deal. So as you describe things, rather than it showing up on screen via presentation mode, I will put it on screen in the final version of this. And I'm not.
Sounds good, compa.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about people knowing that I did that because hopefully it'll look good. So in this take 2. You were asking me a question about, and ask it again so to make sure I have a good handle on the query.
Well, I'll also bring in my intro that was regrettably lost to the oblivion of space time, but
Yes.
make it shorter to sublate myself. No, hi sai, annyeonghaseyo everyone. It's me, Alkmi again. I'm an Okinawan Korean Japanese diaspora. I'm a student of decolonial Marxism Leninism. But this shit that we're sharing with you guys, this is our beautiful gifts and revolutionary inheritance given to us by Marxist-Leninist comrades. This is for anyone who's interested in Pan-African, Black liberation, and Indigenous national liberation and land back. This is for anarchists. This is for revolutionary nationalists, not just for socialists. Although I am one. If you're a friend of Indigenous and Black liberation, African liberation, then you're a friend to me. And, apropos of that, drawing on our revolutionary traditions, shout out to Luna Nguyen, and her wonderful spouse and partner, American Johnson. They did the laborious and important labor of translating the Vietnamese for secondary school students, I think college students actually, curriculum of the principles of Marxism-Leninism, of scientific socialism, and of dialectical. This is what we're going to be explicating a little bit in the series that Comrade Dwayne has been so generous to offer me a spot on to help learn with you. We're going to be explicating and understanding and appreciating and learning how to apply a knowledge system called materialist dialect. It is the methodology of the dialectical materialist philosophy, which is the backbone of scientific socialism. It can be used by any revolutionary disciple or accomplice, anarchists and revolutionary nationalists included. Materialist dialectics is a knowledge system that articulates the laws of change and the universal relation. What we've been going through in the past couple of episodes directly with Comrade Dwayne and you all is the 6 universal relationships of matter, or the 6 philosophical dialectical categories. Just to briefly recap, please, if any of you are live, please go back and watch my wonderful Saturdays with Renee's appearances on Black Liberation Media. Shout out to Renee Johnson, shout out to Dr. Ball, shout out to BAP and Hood Communists and Black Men Build and Community Movement Builders. Shout out to all of our Black radical formations. And please go watch my mini-series with Comrade Benji Schoendorf, anti-imperialist psychologist as well, clinical psychologist, called Dialectical Sandbox on the Substack, which is fertile. In addition to Dialectical House Party, this wonderful channel me and Comrade Dwayne have. There's simply no time to start at a ground level. I appreciate you all who've been following along. For those of you who are first time jumping right in, you'd probably be best served watching maybe episode. That's the start of when we explicate these pairs. To briefly recap, in our most recent appearances with you all, Comrade Dwayne and I have been elucidating the possibility reality dialectical philosophical category. This is the pair that deals with essentially how to transform reality and how to transform action. We dealt with the essence and phenomenon philosophical category pair in universal. This deals with the inner nature of things and their external manifestation. This pair basically gives us the tools for understanding the true nature. We also next dealt with the content and form universal relationship. This philosophical category pair essentially deals with the composition of things and the structure and the organizational arrangement. And it's basically used for us socialists, us revolutionary actors, to learn how to manipulate and suppress change. Very interesting. We can get into that a little later. The necessity action category pair we dealt with was essentially the one that deals with the interplay between inevitability and contingency or chance or randomness. This pair helps us navigate the two and be able to be prepared for the unexpected and to leverage the inevitable. The last two category pairs and universal relationships that Luna's book and our Vietnamese comrades have bequeathed to us in this text, there's probably more. There's more like 22. That's a source of my own scholarship and independent work. We can get into that as time goes on more advanced levels of the material. But essentially, the last two of the basic six category pairs and universal relationships of materialist dialectics, you all, is reason and result and the particular general. We'll be expecting to probably get into the bulk of our limited scope of these categories and these concepts today. And in the near future, we'll probably be explicating more into the principle of development and the principle of general relation. And then after that, like a spiral, returning to the laws of change and the six category pairs, but on a deeper, more, you could say more applicable, more detail oriented. So today, we're essentially going to be dealing with reason and result, the universal relationship that deals with the materialist dialectical version of cause and effect. Essentially, this helps us understand where the origin of and where change comes and what change ultimately is, which is mutual. And the particular general relationship category pair, which is many of our materialist dialecticians throughout many different Marxist-Leninists and continental traditions, including our Chinese Marxist-Leninists, consider this to be one of the most important and core essential category pairs of materialist dialectic, besides contradiction. Because this pair is what shows you how all things are connected and how all things are also different. And this has very important implications and ramifications in epistemology analysis. But what I asked Comrade before we got cut off in our first take that will be lost to oblivion is, Comrade, when you think about these philosophical category pairs, these universal relationships, in your analysis and your application and your practice of them, which one or ones do you have the weakest relationship? Maybe a shaky one. And which ones do you have the strongest and most comfortable with, in use or in conceptual?
I think reason result is one that I feel the need to dive into more, whereas a necessity accident makes sense to me immediately, right? Like the moment it's described in detail, this category pair. I can think of numerous examples because, of course, you can derive that directly from the world of physical laws or the behavior of nature, for example. Whereas reason result, this is also true for reason result. I do understand that, but I find it how would I put that? I find it a little more challenging to generate in my head examples.
No, that's beautiful fodder for our conversation, Kompa. Thank you. Explicating a little further on that thought before we jump in, what are some of these pairs that you think there's an impoverishment of application or intuition or usage of in the comrades or the everyday people around us? It can be on an intuitive or a rational level. And then what are some things that you think, what are some concepts that you think they're already strong? So basically, what's the lay of the land?
Particular, what immediately comes to mind is particular general. I think that because of the way that we are taught within the Western world, I think that we have a great deal of difficulty applying particular general.
Can you give me some examples of that in comrades or normal people?
When we have difficulty understanding that trends can also be examples of things that can appear in a particular way, or that particular events or entities and so forth can be examples of a general phenomena. There's I guess there's a reason why that phrase "connect the dots" is often used, right? And this is what, and it's said often because it's something that people I think that we often fail to do, is connect those dots. Let me go on mute for a second to clear my throat. Okay. That's one that really comes to me immediately as an example of something that I think we fail to do routinely to our detriment. I mean, I think in our previous conversation we were talking about how in the U.S. context liberals will fixate on a particular person, but fail to see the structure or superstructure of the system in which that person is operating. Like, we will be saved by this person. And then, so they're not seeing these connections between particular and general. And that's just one application of this pair. There are other applications, of course, but that's the one that comes immediately to mind.
Oh, that's beautiful, compa. Thank you. I completely agree with you. And the only thing I would say, audience, it might be a little annoying. I agree with Comrade Dwayne too much. There might not be too much diversity of thought, but I'll say the same thing in a different way. Materialist dialectics wants you to think of the universe and everything in human society, thought, and nature as being connected. So being defined by relationship, not by static metaphysical property. And as all it wants you to think of all things as connected because of relationships, and it wants you to think of us all things as processes unfolding in time, as processes. So that means they are not disconnected and they are not frozen. Things are just phases of longer states of development and lines of temporal transformation, whether it's the human species, whether it's me being hungry on a Saturday. And things are not disconnected from anything around them. The Western capitalist, white man, settler colonial, epistemological, paradigmatic matrix that we live in, especially in occupied Turtle Island and Nabi Ayala, wants you to think of the exact opposite philosophical presupposition of materialist dialectics. On a very deep level, Comrade Dwayne, the words that the Vietnamese Marxist-Leninists use for this kind of thinking that the Western world wants you to do, as opposed to dialectical materialist thinking, is metaphysical and ideal. Now, you all who were watching this, don't get too upset if you have different associations with those words. In the Vietnamese Marxist-Leninist canon of philosophy, idealism means you think that mind created matter or that mind is not matter. It's not true. It's the other way around. Mind is a type of matter, right? All things are subject to material laws, including the consciousness, social or single. And all things, the metaphysical view wants you to think of them as disconnected and static, frozen, not moving, not changing, not having a history or a future, being categories that will always remain the same and do not require other things around them that are not them to be connected to give them definition.
Note how in the text
that is anti-politics as well.
Exactly.
So this goes from philosophy all the way down to liberals assuming that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie breaking up have nothing to do with capitalism.
Right.
When people don't see generals, another way of saying that is you're not seeing the relationships that give them their properties. So another way of saying that on a very deep philosophical indirect level, you guys, the Vietnamese materialist dialecticians want you to say, or want you to understand that they want you to think of things as not having any relationships. They want you to think of things anti-relationally. The only true way to think of things is to think relationally. What a lot of our American, Indian, indigenous, and African brothers and sisters and ancestors. And you have to think about things processually. There are always moments of a longer process unfolding in time. Go ahead, compa. I'm sorry.
I was going to add, with regards to this belief that things don't change, that in the text, this is mentioned as being one of the key ideological components of fascism, right? That, that things should not change, things cannot change, and that if there is change, it is undesirable and something that can be resisted.
And reversed.
And reversed, exactly. Like it's at the very heart of any form of fascist ideation.
No, absolutely. And we can get more into this when we get to deeper levels of the material. This is the very beautiful thing about materialist dialectics, you all. It can explain things from a philosophical level, but it can penetrate all the way down to the scientific and the praxeological and the kind of ways that we have to undo the thinking that we've been conditioned into to help deprogramming the people around us to being revolutionary subjects, as opposed to being white settler consumer vessels of capitalist liberal ideology, right? Which is basically another spectrum of what Dwayne refers to as fascism. I would argue that to the new Africans here in Abya Yala and the 574 plus sovereign national formations that existed in Turtle Island, for them, fascism was long before Nazism. It was when settler colonialism and the seed of the Ma'afa first started. So when it comes to fascism or liberalism, I think it's oftentimes maybe more clarifying in a philosophical sense in this conversation to just talk about conservatism or reactionary thought, and fascism and liberalism can be different manifestations of that. That's a whole other conversation, comrade. But I think the Vietnamese text, just to point out for those of you following along, they don't say fascism. What they do say is they say conservatism or resistance to change it.
Yes.
Remember, this is all translated from Vietnamese. So
that's right.
You could see fascism as an expression of this. But they're basically saying, again, we can revisit this at later times, audience, but this is one of the beautiful philosophical things about materialist dialectic. This is basically saying it's bad to be against change. That's conservative. It's also bad to want change to happen before certain amounts of materials or realities have been manifested or built up. That's also bad, because even if you want the right things to change, you are not being objective and realistic about the things and the processes that are prerequisites for change to happen. That is called left-sided thinking. And you and me and us comrades in everyday life in Turtle Island, especially when we encounter comrades that are wrong about China, North Korea, Cuba, Laos, or actually existing socialism. This is what we call ultra-leftism. This is why also ultra-leftism, or as Comrade Lenin himself called it, left-wing communism, an infantile disorder. This is also why this is reactionary too. Comrade Dwayne, all I want to say is beautiful point. I love what you said. I also want to add that being ultra leftist is conservative. Well, how alchemy? The materialist dialectics knowledge system gives us a beautiful set of tools to explain this. It's the law of quantity and quality. No time to get into this right now, but you guys can see this explicated in me and Dwayne's, I think, third or fourth episode. Comrade Dwayne, when quantities have been built up to a certain point, trigger a quality shift. All things go through this. Quantity is just the countable, measurable aspects of anything, phenomenon, process, or thought, human society, nature, or human cognition. And qualities are the differentiable properties and aspects and essential characteristics. They're what separate things, right? And they're also how things are. Because in materialist dialectics, difference is also a type of. No time to get into that. Comrade Dwayne, when all things reach a certain quantity threshold that's unique to you, right? It will undergo a transformation into an identity of something. That's called a quality shift. To be conservative in the Vietnamese political philosophical definition is to be against quantity shifts that are going to lead to a quality shift after enough have already been built up where the quality shift is. Another way of saying what Dwayne articulated so beautifully is that to be against change, to be for the reversal of change, to be unaccepting of change is another way of the Vietnamese articulating right-sided thinking. You refuse to allow quality shifts to happen when they're inevitable after quantity has been built up to a certain particular situation. Left-sided thinking is its opposite. It's also equally idealist in metaphysics. The Vietnamese comrades articulate, when you want a quality shift to happen, comrade, you want foodlessness to be solved on your block, you want queer liberation or indigenous liberation right now, before we can build up the necessary quantity of consciousness, of materials, right, of capacity to transform reality in economic, political, cultural, and military-based on Minecraft ways. You are threatening the lives of people. You're putting people in danger. You're putting your own project in danger. You're being unrealistic because you're not recognizing there are certain quantities and thresholds that need to be reached, built up to, accumulated prior to transformation that are of the rupturous kind or the revolutionary. To expect or to will changes of the qualitative kind to happen before quantitative thresholds have been reached of certain required quantities. It's different for every time, space, and place and object. That's conservative. Because by being ultra leftist or being a left-sided thinker, you're trying to expect change out of a material universe that is going on its own clock. So to reverse change or to resist change, Comrade Dwayne, is conservative and right-wing. To be ultra leftist, to force change before proper material objective analysis has been conducted, to understand how to bring about that change without just your thoughts. That's idealist, metaphysical, and ultimately reactionary. Isn't that interesting, Comrade?
It's quite interesting. And recently, to apply this, I was on Twitter. An Iranian military commander was praising Minister Arashi, saying that he's taken a lot of heat. You know, people keep assuming that, you know, he's too soft or, you know, he's in the pocket of, you know,
He's capitulated.
he's capitulating. And what this commander was saying was that he's playing a role that your mind is not subtle enough to understand, which is that, of course, we had to pursue this particular strategy of the memorandum of understanding, which if the U.S. was agreement capable, then it would have worked out. But we know that they're not. But we had to do this shadow play, and Rashid, he did what he was supposed to do, and he did it, you know, quite brilliantly, actually. And so when it came time, when all of the pieces were in place, and it was time to demonstrate Iran's ability to devastate, you know, the enemy, then the time for having these conversations was over. But he put his life on the line because, of course, you know that both the Americans and the Israelis were trying to kill, in addition to the GCC states. So his point was that this ties back into quantity and quality, right? Because, you know, everything had to be in place before a particular type of action could be taken. And this is what an ultra leftist doesn't understand. In fact, many of the people in social media, supposed leftists, you know, who are supportive of the Islamic Republic, you know, their criticisms were always, I noticed, based upon an infantile. That's why Lenin was so correct to say, let's use this phrase, an infantile understanding of strategy and tactics and the world itself, you know. So it's like, oh, you know, Iran should just fire missiles at everybody all the time. Well, no, it shouldn't. No, it shouldn't. It should do exactly what it's doing, which is respond to what your opponent is doing. This gives you political legitimacy. but also strategically, because you don't have to wait. The fact that the U.S. bombed a particular facility or did something doesn't mean that your response has to be 100% proportionate, but it then provides you with the necessary strategic or tactical pretext to then conduct your operation. You see a very clear understanding of this, in the Iranian leadership, like this particular relationship. You do not hear or read, in most cases, an understanding of this amongst Western leftists, or certainly not ultra-leftists.
If the quality shift is get the USA the fuck out of West Asia, certain quantities have to be built up before that can occur. Certain relationships have to be ruptured or transformed with the Zionist entity.
Exactly.
Certain relationships and contradictions have to be introduced and resolved between Iran and the Gulf states. And between Iran and the Gulf states that are willing to play ball, and Iran and the Gulf states that are willing to play ball with the Yankees.
Yes.
There are certain relationships and quantitative buildups that have to occur in the relationship between Ansar-Allah and Iran, and the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah, and the Islamic, I wasn't supposed to say that word, whatever, fuck you. And you can edit that out, or you can, and the Palestinian resistance. The quality shift is what we all agree on. But if we don't agree on how to get there, you could be endangering people and comrades and lives by trying to apply an analysis that has not studied the particular conditions that impose certain particular quantitative limits on when the change can happen. That's a very fancy way of saying what the Vietnamese comrades say always much more beautifully than you or I, not Comrade Duane. You're eloquent, but I'm not good like the Vietnamese are. The Vietnamese say, stop expecting quality shifts before quantity has built up. Do never try to stop quality shifts after quantity has already been built up to a threshold. Do not be impatient. That's left-sided. Do not be rigid. That's conservative. But we can move on from that, comrade. But do you see how a lot of these comrades are relationships that exist in the universe? Misrecognition or a lack of the ability to recognize relationships between quantity and quality, between things and what they're related to. That's a lot of where fascist, liberal, conservative, pro-capitalist thinking, pro-colonial, imperialist thinking comes from. They're leveraging your inability to recognize universal laws that are already there. As Ali Qadri says, there's a dialectic of change. They try everything they can to make you see there's not change and there's no laws of change, and hiding the dialectic. It's quite inspiring when I put it like that.
This happened also during the height of the COVID emergency. Of course, the virus still exists. It's still with us. It's still killing. It's still maiming people. At the height, when it was new, once the state, once various states had grown weary of taking measures, and of course were unwilling to do the investment in air filtration and so forth that would be required to minimize the risk to us, because of course states don't care about their people, the elites don't care about their people. What we started to get from states, from capitalist states, was the message: it's over, it's done, and go back to exactly the way things were prior to the death because of disease of millions of people.
The quantity wasn't there of vaccinated individuals.
Exactly.
The quantity wasn't there of individuals who knew how to be in a public space without spreading and taking proper hygiene measures. So guess what, guys? The quality shift happened. Not the good kind. The quality shift of it spreading more, of it being entrenched longer, which it still is, right? Of it giving us long COVID. There could have been a good quality shift, Dwayne's trying to point out. We could have had a quality shift of, like, the People's Republic of China or Iran, as far as most of us in the West, or North Korea know. They waited, they supplied, they provided, they battened down the hatches for their people. They kept quantities of hunger low. They kept quantities of food and capital circulating to citizens high. They kept it to a point where when it came time to reopen the economy, as deleterious or not, as you and I might judge it to be, Korea and China and Iran achieved a quality shift of going back to work and not having a mass pandemic resurgence. We did not have that quality shift because quantities weren't respected and built up properly. Why? Because the proletarians are running everything. So don't say that they're unscientific and undialectical. They let this stuff happen. They also utilize these laws too, you guys. So they want you to not understand quantity and quality. Don't think that they don't use it. We're just using it to analyze what they didn't do for us. They were very much doing for them, though. Look at all the millions of dollars that are made from the funds for the small businesses. There were quantity shifts happening. There were quality shifts happening, just not in getting rid of COVID.
And I want
to the bottom line.
And I want to stress, as I do in every one of these dialogues, I want to stress that as abstract or highfalutin or academic as these concepts seem, what we are striving to do here is to tie them to everyday concerns, because they can be applied to everyday concerns, just as physics can seem, in its if expressed via mathematics, or even when described, in natural language, say physics can seem very complex. Well, natural world is indeed complex, but it seems like something that has nothing to do with your life, and yet the mathematics that describe gravity have everything to do with your life. When you trip over a rock, you're walking through the parking lot of your favorite store, you trip over something and you fall onto the ground, and perhaps you chip a tooth. Well, physics is very much in motion there. Whether we want to acknowledge all the mathematics or we're aware of it or not, um, all of that fancy expressions of these laws of motion and laws of change from the state of being upright to the state of being on the ground in pain, they all apply to our everyday life. And in a similar way, I would say that what we are describing here is applicable to our everyday life. We simply have to tease out these examples. And that's why we structure this conversation the way we do, to try to present the category pairs and then tease out the everyday examples. And I encourage people to think of your own, to do an exercise for yourself, to think of your own, because
especially when you're solving problems, when you're picking up your kids, you're cleaning your laundry, your dishes, you're making dinner. All these are problems that are defined by these universal relationships, by contradiction, by particularity.
If you're dealing with your employer, you're dealing with various things, just so many things.
This is the philosophy of problem solving, by the way, you guys. So it only works when you use it to solve it.
Yeah.
P.S. Most white philosophy is the opposite. So this is why Asian philosophy, Marxist philosophy is better. This is a philosophy for solving problems.
As a slight digression, what would you say? Like, what was Kant? Was it Kant or Hegel? I think we all. Well, not. I shouldn't assume, but those of us who've studied dialectics, Hegel, of course, comes up quite a bit. But of course, there's a long history of Western philosophy that we've been encouraged to worship and to look up to, starting with, Plato and the Greeks and so forth, Sophocles and those fellows, and into the present day, in which you have academic philosophers who are paid to apparently just say that so-called AI is intelligent. That seems to be how they earn their money these days, is, working for Google or, whatever. But you just mentioned that the point of, say, Vietnamese philosophical tools and other
global South dialectical materials, Kwame Nkrumah's conscientism, Chinese style.
Yeah.
Basically everywhere outside of West Europe where diamat has been applied, including Russia. It's to transform the world, not just to understand it.
How would you, and with that in mind, how would you describe, as a point of contrast, what the West has been about with its philosophical systems?
That's a big question, comrade, and you're asking for trouble by asking me, because I can talk mad shit about white people and their civilizational paradigmatic constructs. I won't. Well, I will, but I won't do it to my fullest quantitative extent. I think we can move on into reason and result, comrade, but it is a beautiful segue. And I would say, please, comrades, go watch my appearances on Benji Schoendorf's miniseries, Dialectical Sandbox. I go on super long, unhinged, anti-settler colonial, decolonial, anti-imperialist rants about white civilization, white paradigmatic structures and cultural technologies and inheritances. And to make a long story short, you guys, it does come back to idealism / metaphysics philosophy versus philosophy that is materialist and objective and dialectic. And I think one strand I can tease out, you're going to activate me in all the most unhinged ways when you ask me about Kant, comrade. I'm not an expert, but I can talk mad shit about the stuff that came before Marx. And I'll curtail myself, but I'll say it's interesting you brought up Kant, comrade. He's a perfect microcosm to explicate a general. That's true generally between not just European philosophical traditions, because there's more than one. Europeans have been dialectical too. You guys are like 80% bad, but 20% dialectical, okay? No one on earth is like completely undialectical. It's just you guys hegemonized a wrong anti-dialectical form of thinking on all of our particular dialectical. When I say us, comrades, I'm talking about us global South people. Yeah, I mean East Europeans too. Maybe even Southern Europe, before the whole bad Booker colonialism capitalist seed spread into you, and it spread out from. I'm talking about Latin America. I'm talking about Abya Yala, the indigenous East, Western, Northern, Central, Southern, African, Southern, Central Asian, Southeast Asian, East Asian, North Asian, indigenous, philosophical, oftentimes very dialectical, and sometimes materialist tradition. Generally, comrade, you guys will see this more explicated in my talks with Benji. I've said often, a very nice way of boiling down the difference between philosophy that's for revolution, the philosophy of brown people and black people and us colonized people and our inheritance of our cultural traditions, but also indigenizing the Marxism, Leninism that we got throughout various points in objective world history to those patterns and those inheritances. I would say, comrade, Europeans and white people and their philosophical traditions, by and large, don't respect matter. And they don't respect matter by viewing matter as disconnected, as something separate from mind, and as something that is not relational and not driven by opposing forces. This is where we get lots of formal logic. No, formal logic's not the worst thing in the world. Dialectical logic just sublates it and contains it as its part, but extends it. So what I'm saying, you guys, is that Europeans are really great at thinking about things when they're not changing and when they've already formed into an object when it comes to philosophy. Europeans are really good at thinking about processes that are undergoing quantitative shifts and not qualitative transformation. Europeans are really good at defining things in one context without being able to universalize the properties that you define something as in all contexts. Most dialectical thought, in a very broad nutshell way of saying it, is the opposite of those. When you think about matter in terms of it's always changing and it's always being connected internally and externally to other things beyond it, that is the true way the material world is actually arranged, from the chemical to the philosophical, psychic, social, political, physical, and chemical and mechanical level and biological level. Things are not isolated. Nothing in the universe is to a black hole, from a black hole to a eukaryotic cell, right? To a capitalist economy, right? European thought, when I say they disrespect matter by taking interconnection and change for granted, what I mean by that is, and I say this to my spouse and my partner all the time, the Vietnamese materialist dialectical definition of matter is not the science's definition of matter. We've gone over this already on this podcast. But what I'll remind the audience is that the philosophical dialectical materialist definition of matter, Comrade Dwayne, is anything that exists objectively and independently beyond and outside of, and independently from human content. Matter is anything outside of your human mind, including the minds of collectives and social relationships that come from human mind. Even other minds, to you as the observer, are technically matter. When I say matter, I mean objective material exists, including mind, not something that you can touch or something that has the phases of a liquid, solid, gas, Bose-Einstein condensate, or plasma. Again, these are physical sciences definitions of matter. The philosophical definition of matter is anything that exists outside of me. Kant was the dude that said, "I think, therefore I am." Sums up European Western philosophy's difference from Eastern and more materialist dialectical global South philosophies in a nutshell, comrade. Europeans are idealists because they think their minds come. If you take that to its philosophical extreme, you think the individual comes. That's not how humans evolved out of Africa millions of years. Our greatest technologies was our thumb, our language, our ability to form social relationships, and our ability to form human nature relationships. That's called labor, right? To survive. You basically need both, the social and a natural component. That's what historical materialism, Luna's second book, shout out to Luna Oy, says humans are. Our essence, which is particular to every place, depending on the land we come from, shout out to Vine Deloria Jr., there's not a universal essence of humans in the way Europeans philosophize it in a stinky Buchra way. The only thing universal about all humans is that we're social and natural. We need the not human world, and we need the not me part of humanity, which is others, right? Ubuntu, I am because you are. It's a Southern Central African philosophical tradition that's very much in line with this, you guys. The European Kantian tradition, specifically of I think, therefore I am, says an individual does not need others. There's no such thing as societies. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan type thinking. There are only individuals. There are no connection. Everything is isolated and frozen. It's not changing. And all things are just what they are. I think the Eastern philosophy, to sum it up better, is it's not I think, therefore I am. It's all this is, so therefore I am. Or you guys are, so I am. Or we are because I am. What I'm trying to say, you guys, is that the European philosophy doesn't take matter as objective existence outside of mind. They think that the individual's mind creates all of material existence that it is. In a nutshell, the Eastern, indigenous Abiyala, African, even West Asian, dialectical and indigenous traditions that we have, more or less all kind of say the same thing. Everything's connected and changing. Whether you call it spirits or God that moves these changes. We're all a lot more materialist than Europeans, especially the Kantian variety of philosophical thought, comrade, to answer your question, because we take the thing that exists outside of an individual as first, which is nature, which is societies, which is polities, which is relationships, right? Because relationships have to involve two things. Europeans, even if they can conceptualize relationships in qualitative leaps, they always start from an axiomatic premise of the individual's mind is first.
Mm-hmm.
There is no individual.
Mm-hmm.
I too abstract for the audience or Dwayne. I know Dwayne's a fucking smart cookie. I know you got it. But my spiky little thing is Europeans and white people don't respect matter, and the rest of us did, and you forced us to think like you. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that is a marvelous way of summing it up. And the reason I say that is because a lack of respect for matter has downstream effects to all sorts of thinking, because that means that there's other things you don't respect, like your fellow human beings.
Because that's matter.
Yes, or
And
different,
nature, which is
or
matter.
visual differences, such as, and we know that there are material reasons on the birth of capitalism for slavery, for example. But there was an ideological, before the capitalist era got well underway, there
They
was
were already idealist metaphysical even before capitalism.
exactly.
Probably with the Romans and the slavery. Yeah.
That's precisely right. And then you can instrumentalize in your mind other human beings. Also, the belief that animals, don't exist really, and then equating when the animals don't exist, and then certain people are not people, there are animals, and it all falls into place ideologically. But it also explains why there are people who, who believe that we can do things that we probably will never be able to do. Certainly not under current conditions, such as
That's left side thinking, comrade.
Yeah,
expecting qualities just before quantities have been built.
We're
expecting impossibilities out of lack of even conditions for possibilities.
That's precisely right. Like, and it also leads to various kinds of illusions about technologies, because rather than people thinking about matter, that matter comes first, they'll think about the ideal of what they would like to see happen with, say, a scientific endeavor or a technological endeavor. And I would say that paradoxically, it would seem, it also leads to a lack of innovation, because if you don't know what you're actually working with, in reality, after a certain point, then you can't really make necessary modifications. Why is it that
it has to do with practice and theory, basically.
Exactly. Why is
when
it
you don't have a relationship to matter, you don't have a relationship to practice, which is the only real way you can learn about matter. So it all goes into.
We know that the Russians have hypersonic missiles, to be militaristic about it. We know that Iran has hypersonic missiles. Some of us have probably seen these astounding images of the really remarkable trails that these missiles leave as they work their way through the atmosphere. The US,
they fucking ionize air by grabbing electrons in the wake of their fucking stream to avoid tracking.
It's really
Tell me
something.
A white person that could have thought of that. You stole our technology for 500 years. Now we're coming back to you.
Well, this is
That's
what
dialectics,
I'm saying, is that, Lockheed has claimed to have a hypersonic project forever. Now, there are political economy reasons for them to continue stretching that out. But I'm also saying that, the ability to think about matter first and, leads to all sorts of positive outcomes. And it also means that you don't do you're less likely to do stupid things in your life.
You don't waste energy and you don't endanger people unnecessarily.
Exactly.
That's the two things I've concretely found.
Exactly.
Why materialism beats idealism.
When there have been a couple of times in which people have almost driven directly into me because they're not paying attention, right? Because they have an idea. To give this like a real concrete examples, driving.
Idealism in the Netherlands traffics for Dwayne on a fucking Monday morning. Yep.
Driving is one of the most material things you can do. And it's also quite dangerous.
Dialectical. Gotta always balance between extremes.
Exactly. But if you have an idealized view, well, I have the right of way. Well, yes, but your idealized view of what your right is has nothing to do with the laws of physics, bringing that in again. Because
you're just not assuming the whole that you're embedded in, you're assuming that your part is the whole.
Precisely. Exactly. So that you advance your vehicle forward without regard for the surroundings. You could hurt someone, hurt yourself, kill someone, kill yourself. So again, I want to stress how what seems to be simply philosophical or academic or abstract has direct consequences to how we think. Now, what I would like to do. Oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
What I'd like to do, because for the audience, we're trying to be disciplined.
We're trying to be. I'm sorry, audience. It's 40 minutes.
Because we do like to talk.
We still got something. Yeah, we do. Yeah. Islanders.
I want to. It's true. I want to give us 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
To focus on.
Let's get into reason result. Yeah.
Exactly. Like 30 minutes to really just hone in.
I'll try to even beat you and try to get in general. I'm sorry, audience. Me and Dwayne are just great friends outside of the comradeship. You can. I apologize. This is my bad. I'm an Asian. I'm supposed to be no, comrade. I'll end it with this. I'm reading a book on Chinese dialectics. Aixiqi. You guys should look him up. He's one of the people before Mao that helped popularize Western dialectics and harmonize in China and harmonize it with Chinese indigenous stuff. I'll just end it with philosophy is not some.
By the way, be sure to share a link because I'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah, it's free to get, written in 2005, same year as Luna's book. And crazy. Our Chinese brothers and sisters are light years beyond us. And anyways, Aixiqi. Look him. Aixiqi. Aixiqi. He was one of the great philosophical dialectical materialists popularizers in China. He said this: philosophy is not understood by normal people, but that's not normal people's fault. It is not mysterious or disconnected. Philosophy is just life in continuity. Philosophy is like something that has roots in everyday life. It lays down everywhere. The ordinary is philosophical. And then this is outside of Aixiqi, but this is something I read recently. To not be philosophical is like opting out of politics. That too is a philosophical. You can't get away from philosophy. But we in Turtle Island, occupied, colonized people, we've had a poison relationship, a white, metaphysical, idealist, Eurocentric relationship. Don't let them ruin that. Philosophy is what us brown people do to change the world. White people just told you all of philosophy is meant to do is to not change the world and think about the world. That's philosophy. It's bad philosophy. This is the philosophy of change and of interconnection. This is what communism is all about, and liberation. But to my point, and negating my own negations, comrade, you guys will all see on the screen that future Dwayne will put up, slide 44 in my slideshow that I've created for you guys to supplement this presentation. We're in the reason and result category there. Simply put, comrade Dwayne, and I want this to be more of a dialogue between us. I think you understand this more than you give yourself credit. I'll put it like this. Side note, Luna and EJ have translated certain Vietnamese words in the category canon to possibly a little bit something different than what you see in the Western and even Soviet Union Marxist-Leninist. I've taken my own liberties with re-Englishizing some of these, selectively using the Vietnamese terms that they've translated sometimes and other times not. You see this obviousness and randomness. I prefer the English necessity and contingency, or necessity and acts. It rolls off the English ear better. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Don't take the way I'm teaching this to you guys as the only way to teach. And I want you guys to know I'm not a philosophy guy at all, so don't take what I'm saying with Condon and white people as like the only. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I'm not a philosophy guy. I'm just a Marxist guy. And I really love the philosophy of Marxism. It has a lot to say about other philosophies, but I'm not a fucking, don't take me I'm not in that world.
Thank God you're not a philosophy guy. I mean, at least in the Western context, it has been balkanized. It's been balkanized into the academy to its detriment, where, like Marxism, it belongs in the streets, right?
I want street philosophy. I want communist philosophy. I want red Chinese philosophy, not Taiwanese, Hong Kong, or continental. Yeah. So, guys, reason and result is the Vietnamese dialectical materials version of cause and effect. Luna and EJ are sure to note in their text, the Vietnamese call it cause and effect. The reason why they chose to use reason and result is to kind of detach your Western mind from understanding it in the metaphysical European idealist tradition of cause and effect, which, to make a long story oversimplified, European metaphysical philosophy believes one cause equals one effect. That's incorrect. In the materialist dialectical canon of the Vietnamese Marxist-Leninist ideology, we understand that one cause can have many effects, and one effect can be due to multiple causes. The best way to fluidly and relationally understand these concepts, I think the Vietnamese are genius. I haven't even seen this too much in the Chinese, so shout out to Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh. The Vietnamese call it cause and effect, but Luna and EJ call it reason and result. I think that's better. So no, audience, this is their own intervention in calling these words, these things. Even if you go to Vietnam and learn Vietnamese, they'll call it cause and effect. To the Western ear, it's just better because a cause for something is a mutual impact between two, or between two aspects within something. The result or the effect in materialist dialectics is just any change that is produced from the mutual impact. You guys, on a side personal note, I think that's extremely powerful because it gets you out of the metaphysical, static, episodic way of thinking of cause and effect as just disconnected events that are not relational, that I think EJ and Luna call it in their book, static, episodic events that happen. Events do happen, you guys. But the Vietnamese reason result pair kind of gets your brain into thinking of when shit happens, it's because two different things interact. That is absent in the Western canon of cause and effect. And I think too, we won't explicate this here, but just like what Dwayne said about idealism and a disrespect for matter, philosophically speaking, can lead to really fucked up shit like Roman Catholicism and American Firstism and capitalism and imperialism. So too can a metaphysical understanding of cause and effect comment. When you understand, this is what EJ, Luna's husband, who did all the annotations of the book, calls the development model of cause and effect or causation, is what the Vietnamese and the materialist dialectical canon uses, Comrade Dwayne. The development model says changes or developments, transformations occur from mutual, as opposed to a cause is something that makes an effect happen. Why is that different, Alchemy? Because when you understand cause and effect as a mutual impact between two things, or between two different aspects within something, and a change that results from that, already right away, your conceptualization is already capacious enough to allow there to be more than one reason to cause the same change. Or many, many, many changes can occur out of me and Dwayne just touching each other and interacting this
Mhm.
1 hour, 40-minute session. We already, in normal people, everyday non-Marxist and non-highfalutin formal logic, metaphysical logic, understand one cause can have many effects and many effects can have one cause. When you go to the bathroom and it accidentally causes a lot of problems with your work because you were there too long, or when you buy the eggs for too much of an expensive price that your family can't afford, but that was the closest thing around you, so it's going to cause you to not pay for oboe lessons for your daughter. We already understand this as normal people, but the Western way of systematizing their philosophy is a very not realistic way of looking at how things happen in the universe and of causation. And I'll use this to just jump right into the definition. The relationship between reason and result, you guys, for this pair is that every single mutual impact that occurs has to make a change happen. It doesn't mean it's one change, and every change can be due to more than one mutual impact, right? But the relationship between reason and result, the Vietnamese say, Comrade Duane, is inevitable. So whenever two things mutually impact or interact, there's always going to be change between both. It would be metaphysical and the opposite of dialectics to think the otherwise. I'm going to touch you and you're not going to touch me. I'm just going to talk to you and not be affected by you, right? Also, the reverse is untrue too. Whenever you see a change out in the world, you guys, any change, development, transformation, or motion that happens in human society, or politics, or thought, or nature, it's always due to some kind of mutual impact between two things that are not the same. It's a very powerful but simple way of explaining how every time two things touch, there's always consequences. A consequence is just a change. If you see changes in the world and you don't know where they come from, you better align your mind to thinking somewhere, somehow, there were two things interacting.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's extremely powerful. It's extremely absent and vulnerabilizing in a Marxist and non-Marxist population for getting people to misunderstand where changes come from and what causes things to happen. And comrade, this is my first pass, so this isn't the whole thing, but I'll end my first pass with this. The Vietnamese say it's very disastrous to misattribute the wrong reasons to results. You have to do practice and research and evidence-based investigation, like your friend Dennis Coxton in his career. You have to be a detective, you guys, to understand the real mutual impact between actual two things that existed that cause a change. You can't just take what the bourgeois news is saying, or Donald Trump, or Joe Biden, the Democrats and Republicans. I'll end it with this, comrade. The Vietnamese book says the Gulf of Tonkin incident is cited in U.S. bourgeois history making as the reason, the cause by the Vietnamese invasion.
Mm.
That never really happened.
Mhm.
A ship of the U.S.'s ownership was never attacked by Vietnamese people. It's a lot like the
Mhm.
Bay of Pigs invasion with Comrade Duane's people, the Cubans, right?
Mhm.
They created a false reason to
Mhm.
explain the result of us invading. The real mutual impact was the mutual impact of the contradiction between imperialism, capitalism, and third world Vietnamese socialist liberation. That mutual impact between these two forces is what caused the USA to invade and to create a false premise for it. All that's to say, you guys, you have to understand change is being caused by mutual impact. You also have to understand you have to do study on the real objective world to understand really objectively what mutual impacts cause changes. Don't just take what someone said as the reason. You cannot misrecognize what reasons cause results. That can lead to disastrous mistakes. And the Vietnamese also say you cannot reverse reason. You cannot assume a change that was caused by an interaction is the interaction itself. And we'll get into this more after I hear Dwayne's response to me. But reasons and results always shift into each other. So a change that came from mutual impact will always go on to have more
Mhm.
mutual impacts. It's an infinite chain. You guys know this even from Buddhism and from non-Marxism.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we don't want to mistake which reason was responsible for which result. A result will always become a new reason, but don't flip a particular event's reason and result, like the Gulf of
That
Tonkin incident.
that
Go ahead,
is
comrade. What do you think about all that?
that is really very subtle and important. Um, yeah, attributing a result to the wrong reason, which is so common. And as you said, in the case of the propagandized stories of the Gulf of Tonkin and other stories, um, yeah, that simply asking the question, is this the correct reason for this result? Um, can be very clarifying, and it's something that we're discouraged from doing. So, for example, people are told that, the U.S. Invaded Vietnam, to prevent the spread of communism. But of course, that's not really true. Um, or a variety of things, and even in your personal life, when you look at results, and then if you don't have a handle on the actual reason, um, you can it can lead you into some pretty severe errors, because then you don't know how to correct, you don't know how to prevent things from happening in the future as well.
Absolutely, comrade. Absolutely. And just in the interest of time, I'll move on. And again, you guys, this isn't the last time we explicate these pairs. Like a spiral, we'll come back to these maybe one step in our academic curriculum later on a deeper level. But moving onwards, it'll integrate with what Comrade Duane said. It's not only important to recognize that you need to know the true reason for results that happen. You need to always understand that whenever two things mutually impact, there will be a change. A result will always come from a reason, right? Or a relationship. This really is the proper way to say it. Everything in the universe exists as a result of some reason. All reasons were previously results changes that came from previous. So you have to understand these chain backwards and forwards in time. This is why history is really important in the dialectical, because we're basically understanding the chain of reasons and results that got a developmental process that's the object that you're observing right now in your analysis in human society, thought, or nature as the locus of your inquiry. You're understanding its formation by all the mutual impacts that led to its formation and the changes that produced the state that you're seeing it in now, whether it's capitalism or whether it's your dog that has a tummy virus, right? So if you guys see my slideshow with the reason and result, you'll also see it's not just important to understand, to not mistake reason and result, and to understand that reasons and results become each other as well, and to know the true reason for results that happen around you. You have to understand that there's also different types of reasons. So basically, the Vietnamese say there's internal and external reasons, and there's direct and indirect reasons, or immediate and immediate. There's also different kinds of results. There's primary and secondary results. We'll go through each of them briefly. Reasons, again, are mutual impacts between two things. It's just a relationship that causes a change. Okay, you guys? It's a category that describes something that's happening. Don't think of it in two like essentialist or like eternal Kantian kind of ways. Anything that you see happening around you, whenever there's a change, there's two things that touch each other to make change. That's what reason means. Result is the change or development or transformation produced by two things. Internal reasons are mutual impacts that occur between different aspects of the same thing. My kidney and my stomach interacting could produce peptide, the result of me wanting to regulate my blood sugar levels and feeling hungry or feeling sick. Internal reasons are mutual impacts that occur in the component parts of one thing or system, right? External reasons are the mutual impacts that occur between things. Too much to get into here, but I'll cap it off by saying our Chinese brothers and sisters say, you won't find this in the Vietnamese materialist dialectical book. That's why I'm telling you guys this here. But it's everywhere in the Chinese dialectical materialist canon. Internal reasons, internal contradictions, internal mutual impacts, Comrade Duane, they're the basis for it. That's what drives change and what drives reasons to happen. My own body and my own need to fill my hunger is why capitalism is being allowed to take advantage of me through the CMC cycle and compel me to go do a job to have my wage labor and surplus value be exploited every day. My internal relationships drive that, not capitalism. External reasons, external mutual impacts, external relationships, external contradictions are the conditions for the trigger. They can slow down, speed up, or be the thing that breaks the camel's back that causes change to happen. But it doesn't drive change. It's just the catalyst. It's just the condition. It's just the external environment that is required for the internal relationships of something to transform. This is too much to get to here, comrade, but a lot of US people and liberal thought also misrecognizes the internal and the external. This is beyond our 6 pairs, but this touches on reason and result, comrade, because the main thing the Chinese want us to understand is that anything that happens has many reasons. You can't see them all as the same. I have to go to work every day because of capitalism. That's kind of external to me. That's a condition that's taking advantage of my internal need to eat. Otherwise, I'll die. It's set me up in a social relationship where the only way to meet that internal need and those internal results of the internal impacts of my biological system, I have to plug into something that I don't like, which is the wage labor relation. It's external, but it's the thing that's shaping how the change of my hunger drive is being set into motion to manifest in me doing something I don't want to do because of an outside relationship. That's taking advantage of a set of internal relationships that make me have to fill my hunger. So the outside makes me fill my hunger by letting my boss exploit me. That's why you need to understand internal and external reasons, because they have different positionalities. And sorry, Benji, I know people like Comrade Benji hate the word positionality. It actually came from indigenous radical thought. So not everything from academia is bad, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why you have to understand in a transdifferentiated, variegated, as Gabriel Rockhill says, wait, shout to you, Professor Rockhill, the difference of internal and external. I'll let you respond to that, Comrade, but moving on, just to cap off my point, immediate reasons are mutual impacts between things that cause a change. Indirect reasons are reasons that are mutual impacts that have many, many relationships between the impact and the change. This is what Comrade Duane deals with a lot in AI, because people don't understand the true origin, mutual impact of a very, very indirect chain of transformations that are still being caused by this. Please, Comrade, interrupt me. Go on. What are you going to say?
It's funny because you mentioned when you started talking about reason result that I probably understood more than I thought. And looking at your slide,
Was I right?
And you're 100% correct. And I'm also looking at these really lovely, which will be on your screen now, audience. These lovely graphics. Did EJ create the graphics for the book? Yeah, these lovely graphics that EJ created. And what you'll see on the screen, of course, are examples such as, the destruction of a building, an accident, a broken cup, and just very, graspable, examples of reasons that then produce results. And also what the graphic that EJ created shows is precisely what you're talking about, development in materialist dialectics, which is that you can have reasons and results, but then new reasons and new results, or multiple reasons to produce results. As is the case with so-called AI, you have ChatGPT. There is no one thing that produces the output, the result of the chatbot, right?
But the mutual impacts that cause this thing,
Yes.
they all have differentiated positions in our analysis we can understand too, right, comrade?
Exactly.
It has many causes, but they're not all equal. There's
Mhm.
external mutual impacts, right? Like between the capitalist and the worker, right? There's internal mutual impacts, like the profit rate of capitalism just has to compel itself to invest in this. That wasn't going to need any external. What are the first things that come to mind, comrade, when you see this is a deficit in our comrades? Like, let's not talk about normal people. Socialists who don't know dynamic. Why do they need this so much? How do they lack this in their practice and analysis?
Because without this, what they resort to is ideology, which is not flexible enough to be applied to the dynamism of the world, right? Like
How so?
So for example, you say the labor theory of value, and you just say that, and then you try to, which I believe to be a very sound theory, right? Obviously, value comes from labor. But how do you apply that in various situations? Well, you have to then be flexible enough in your thinking and to understand the reason-result pair to see, what is the relationship between, actually, I'll give you a concrete example. And I probably mentioned this before because it's kind of a bête noire of mine. Yanis Varoufakis's neo-techno-feudalism is completely disconnected. What's lacking from this is reason-result. He sees the effect. He sees the result, which is a chatbot. He sees the economic and political power of the tech industry. And then he reaches the conclusion, because he's not looking at the reasons. He's reaching the conclusion by looking at this result, the result being this power, this socio-technical and political power. He reaches the incorrect conclusion because he's not looking at the reasons that, we've entered a new phase of capitalism, and it's similar to feudalism in the past. But if he looked at the reasons, he would be able to then better discern why we're seeing this result, and therefore have a better theory, which would then actually return him and with renewed force to Marxian materialist dialect, right? Mm-hmm. But rather than that, because he approaches this from an ideological standpoint, clearly, like, just a set of, principles, precepts, what have you, he's declaring something that is disconnected from the result because he's not looking at the reasons. Now, what I must say here is that those who are familiar with Rhetorica Desai, geopolitical analyst Rhetorica Desai.
Oh, excellent. I love Professor Desai.
Professor Desai always hits the hour mark and then says, okay. Oh. I love her for that, as for many other things.
We can't be Carlos from Deculture.
No,
sorry, guys.
No, I mean, you know what? Shout out to Carlos, man. Mm-hmm. Dude, it's like a whole work day.
I know, right?
But it's all good. But in our case, we're gonna end it here. Sure. Now we have plans. Let me go on mute for just a second. Clear my throat. Alkmi and I have plans to have an extended conversation that we may do in a quasi-Carlos-like fashion, or
at least on the back end. We might give you a variegated.
We might stagger it. We're going to end this here for today, and of course we're going to have a Dialogue 6, a Dialogue 7, and so on. I should also let everyone know that we are planning, just to whet your appetite, we are planning a podcast, and that will cover this territory, but also we'll be applying it to. We'll be starting with an application of these concepts to the story of technology, the technology industry, and then to illustrate how or materialist dialectics can be applied to things that we struggle with all the time. We strive to do that here in this dialogue, but there's always more to do because it's, what was it a professor of mine used to say, no doubt quoting others, repetition is the key to learning. So, with having said that, I bid everyone adieu for Alchemy and myself, and we will be back again.
Thank you, guys.
Adios, everyone, and have a good day or good
Way
evening.
back. Free Palestine.
Indeed.